Hello, welcome to this webinar on branding and brand tracking. And I'm going to talk to you about branding in general, but my ultimate aim is to talk about the Brandr Index. The Brandr Index is a new tool, not that new, it's a couple of years old, but it builds on a methodology that I've created with energy companies for the past 6 years, and also as a part of my academic career. I'm an associate professor at the University of Iceland, and I run my own consultancy. And a part of what we are doing is selling this Brandr tool, the Brandr Index. So it's a special privilege and honor to be talking to Norwegians. And I'm being an Icelandic guy, then we consider Norwegians our brothers and sisters. And we are thrilled in our company to be working now in Norway. So why am I here? What is it that I'm going to be talking to you about? I'm going to be talking to you about a tool that measures a very unintangible construct, the brand. And to many, it's an emotional thing or creative thing or design thing. It is, but it's also a very strategic thing. And we sometimes forget that. So we need to build all the creativity on science and strategic science. And that's what I want to talk to you about. And all of this comes together in a brand. And let me just start by this slide. So I've heard this. This is actually a quote, I've had several times. So not several times, but I've had this sentiments towards me. So it's not about how we look. It's not about how, if we are cool. It's about making money. And I agree. We are absolutely in business to make money, all the way. And just to throw up this slide, the ultimate goal of companies is to maximize shareholders' value. So that's why but that's exactly why we are doing branding, not because of it. Because if we do branding correctly, we will create an amplifier, a multiplier. A brand, if you will, it's a shouting horn. I mean, if I would have that shouting horn, maybe you can visualize it. I should have it as a prop, but I don't. But if I'd had that, my voice is heard further away. More people will hear it. If I just shout like this without the shouting horn, I'm less effective. That's the power of branding, basically. But if you want to use branding efficiently, we have to be able to measure it well. And there's a lot of good techniques out there, but I'm going to be talking about the Brandr Index. And just quickly to tell you who I am, and these guys are, Philip Kotler is the source on marketing in the world. Kevin Keller is the most known scholar alive, and he worked with most of the major US big brands out there. And they are quoting myself here. In this slide, they are quoting my research, because I'm really, really serious about bringing science into the space to maximize value. So in this slide deck, I'll first talk about branding in general, then I go into more specifics. And we need branding now more than ever. Maybe this is a shaky statement because we always needed it. But things have changed, and we need to build on a logical and emotional connection to our clients, to our stakeholders, to our target groups. And in this country, in Iceland, we had this figure, Postman Pat, and he was a shining example of what a good postal service looked like. He was. And he had time he drove around the English countryside, and he brought his cat along, and he had time to chat and just kind of, give back a little bit. But he cannot compete with drones delivering, he can't compete with drone delivering parcels or letters. It's just, we are going at such a high speed that we really must try to understand really well what we are doing. So we have to measure, we have to understand. And I like this quote, it's an old quote. So this guy was actually the first one who started mass media advertising in the US industry for retailers. And he was asked this question, so how do you know how to spend your money on marketing. And he had this famous answer. Half of the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half. I find this amusing, a little bit funny, but also true. Because there's truthism in the fact that sometimes we are just not careful enough of how we spend money on marketing and branding. So let's talk about this branding thing, what it is. So it's all about owning a piece of the consumer's mind. It is to understand where your brand lives in your consumer's mind and how it lives relative to your competitors and substitute products also, if you go into that. So we need to find our place. We need to position ourselves correctly, because that's the most important thing. But the problem is that sometimes the discussion on brands and branding, it's superficial, because what we see is above sea level, but most of the branding work is a little bit boring. It's not exciting or ad thing. It's not about flashy commercials. It's about doing a really good strategy, and that's all stuff that we do below sea level, if you will. So it's a little bit old to have a picture of an iceberg, but it's relevant in this case. It's really relevant because that's what our task. And when we are building a brand, we are building all those layers of communication, emotional and rational and whatnot, into what people see when they look at our logo and when they see our brand. But logo is just a logo. I made this black and white because logo is, again, just a logo. It doesn't have a meaning. It's an illustration. It's a drawing. It can be a fine drawing, and it can really help us to connect to customers and all that. But branding is not about the logo. It's about what dimensions you add into the logo in the consumer's mind. That's branding. Until then, it's just a drawing. So we need not to overemphasize the factor, about branding revolving around the logo. Colors are important, but still, these are just colors. We have use cases where blue is more relevant than red. Red is a color of excitement. Blue is a color of trust. And I can go on and on and on about what colors mean. Purple being the color of loyalty, etc., etc., etc. So we need to know these things. We honestly need to know these things when we're designing a brand from a design perspective, but it needs to be based on strategy. So, and I like this picture because this pretty much shows how the branding environment looks like. It's multi-layered, it's a lot of different factors, and we need to understand that we are looking at all of those. Not all at the same time, but designing a branding campaign and understanding how a brand should look like should tailor to this picture. So now it's spinning, because branding is not about taking a dart, throw the dart at a moving board and do whatever happens when you touch the board. It's not about that. It's about really understanding how your organization interacts with your environment, and that's very layered, if you will. So this heading, NPS is PS, is a bit provocative. I hope it's not too provocative, but it's not mine. It was about some weeks back. It was a heading in an article that I read. Net promoter score is BS. You know what BS? I'm not going to say that out loud. So not that I'm just going to be talking about NPS a lot. NPS is fine. Net promoter score, for those of you who know it. But it is, like in some cases, other brand tracking tool. NPS is not a brand tracking tool, just to correct, sorry. It's overused. It's not used for the purpose that it was designed originally. So let's look at how, using it too much is simply is not appropriate. So let's look at some cases where people got it wrong. I'll show you some favorite quotes of mine now. So the Americans have needed the telephone, but we do not. We have plenty of messenger voice. This person, if he tried to understand his frame of mind, maybe he was right, but at his time. But obviously, he didn't have the foresight to understand where the world was headed. This guy, just look at how his posture and how powerful he is. This was an executive of 20th Century Fox, 1945, saying that, okay, television is there, but people will not be interested in it after the first 6 months. Obviously, he was wrong. And this guy was saying that, the president of IBM around the same era as the previous guy. So there will be a market for maybe 5 computers in the world. He was wrong. And let's look at a little bit more recent case. Still old, 2007. This is Steve Ballmer explaining that nobody would be buying a tablet for 1,000 euros. The idea in itself was ludicrous. iPhone just wouldn't stick. People wouldn't buy it. It would go out of the market, but it didn't. And many of you that are watching this, you know that you have iPhones yourself. So why am I showing you these slides? I'm showing that although we are smart and we have foresight, we have knowledge and understanding of our market, we can still be wrong. And in a fast-moving society that we live in now, we have fintech, we have energy markets changing, insurance markets changing, retail changing, everything is changing really fast. Cars are turning into EVs, etc., etc., etc. And our phone is not a phone; it's an entertainment device. So how do we stay relevant? How do we make sure that we will not be so utterly wrong like these people that I showed you? I don't know the answer to that. And I don't really think anyone has the understanding of what comes next. Nobody has a crystal ball that can tell us the future. But I can tell you one thing. If we invest in the relationship with our client, then we are buying insurance to stay in business for the long term. If we invest in understanding how they think, what are their pain points, what keeps them up at night, etc., 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 then we will be relevant decades down the line, because we've invested in their minds, in their relationship with them, not the devices that they use, or car that they drive, or house that they live in, or the food that they buy. We understand them. So to be able to understand them, we have to look at branding from a more complex level than some of us are used to. So to many, not all of course, brand tracking is about tracking awareness, or if the awareness is skewing towards being positive or negative, etc. But that's just a base level of understanding your brand. We need to understand how our brand is moving through a pyramid, the pyramid that I'm showing here, or a similar pyramid. But the main thing is we need to understand the rationality of it and the emotions. And I've said this is the third time I say this now in this presentation. We need to understand how we move in layers up, in rationality and emotion until we have a resonance, until we are one with our clients, until we are Tesla, we are Apple, or we are Patagonia, or we are whatever, until we are the same with our clients. And they are proud of us. They even might tattoo our logo on them. That's being a proper brand, not awareness alone, and not simple brand tracking alone. So on brand tracking, I want to show you this tool, the Brandr Index. Brandr is a tricky word, and me being a PhD in branding, I had to think long and hard. Okay, I know I'm Icelandic, so I can say R. I can use the R a lot, but many can't. Danish can. Danish people don't say R. If you think about it, just envision them saying Brandr. But and it's hard for those who are not those who are not used to saying R's like this. But I still stuck to it because that is the word that the Norwegian settlers took with them when they went to the States, when they immigrated. So the word brand became branding. So it's a Norwegian name actually, and I like the narrative. I like the history. I like being able to explain to you why I chose it, and because people understand stories, and that's the narrative. Anyway, that's just the name. Name is not all that important in the logo, as I told you. It's what we do with it. So what it is, I'm going to explain this from a technical perspective, from a functional perspective. When we are understanding our brand, I think back to the pyramid I showed you, we need to do it in layers, really understanding it on multiple layers, not just the awareness. But that's hard. A brand is so hard. I mean, it lives in the environment. It's affected by a war, COVID, economic recession, economic upscale, scandals, whatnot. And when we measure the brand, it can fluctuate across years and within the year. So, and there are so many things that affect it. So it's hard to say, what should we be working on in our brand to fix it? But what is a constant, what should be a constant when we're working on a brand, is the positioning. That is the positioning in our consumer's mind that we want to invest in for the long run. So we have to understand positioning. So it's more relevant to measure the positioning than some other brand features. So that was my task. So when I wrote my PhD, I did it on branding, and I did it in commodities. I was understanding how people that bought energy of any, in any form, or electric cars, or everything that's around energy, how you should talk to them, to engage with them, to help them to invest in this emotional connection. And when I was doing this, I was, at the start of my journey to write a PhD and collect data, I was always looking for models to build my work on. That's the academia. You on shoulders of giants, you find models, and then you're doing a puzzle. You do your small puzzle in a bigger picture. But I couldn't find a model to build my work on. It wasn't there. I found it curious, so I looked some more. But I didn't find it. It was non-existent in the way I understand it. So I said, okay, this is interesting. I kept on with the PhD, collected the data, and thought to myself, and started that. Then I started this. Thinking I have to make this tool, and that's the Brandr Index. So to understand positioning, I have to understand what positioning is made of. It's made of those 4 constructs that you see on the slide: differentiation, segmentation, perception and image, and social responsibility and sustainability. So if we understand those constructs and how they are made up, and I'll go into details in a little while, how they are made up, then we can actually start to improve the positioning. So we have one score, which is the Brandr score. It gives us position relative to the rest of the world, or country, or industry. We break it down to those 4, and then we break it down to 30, and I'll show you those in a while. I'm just taking this out of the product itself. So in this case, we are working with a hypothetical company. It doesn't exist. It's just numbers that we are making up, and we see in their industry, then they are scoring 50. They're scoring 50 something there, and in this case, we are comparing them to B2C, and we can also show them, the Brandr Index range score. So now we have set the states with one number. That's healthy. So we can see how we can stand compared to the rest in one number. If I was a marathon runner and I run in 4 hours, it already tells me if I'm good or not, or how good I am. It doesn't tell me if I want to improve, how I should train, or how I should eat, or how I should sleep, etc. It's just one number. So it's not enough for us to be successful in branding. So we need to break it down. And these are the pillars that I just showed you. And we can, with the product, we can understand all those factors, and we can set it up different ways. Obviously, we can put your score there. We will always have to do that against the Brandr Index, or just the country, and we can show you the 5% lowest and 5% highest, or something else. But this is the way we normally work with this. So then now we need to understand what is differentiation. So first we say, what is brand positioning? And that's those 4 constructs. But let's look only at the first one, differentiation. What is differentiation? So we need to look a little bit further. These items that we see there are the ones that make up the construct differentiation. Okay, so now I'm getting somewhere. I know I'm not scoring high enough, and I can look at the differentiation only, so I can see, okay, what's going on there? What should I be looking at there? And mind you, those items that I'm showing you, they are the result of a lengthy academic work. Years, to be honest, where we started with hundreds and hundreds of different items. And if I had all the time in the world with doing consumer research, I could ask a potential client 500 questions, and I know everything about how he perceives a brand. But nobody will answer 500 questions. We are all rushed the time. We do entertain questions if they are less than 4 minutes. So what we have been doing here now is to cut down this array of items, cut, until we have many enough to paint a complete picture, few enough that people will actually respond in a truthful manner. So those are the ones that build up differentiation. And now we can start to dig a little bit deeper. So we can see that uniqueness is up there on the top. Let's look at uniqueness only. So we started with a big picture, so one score, where I talked about the marathon runner. Then we looked at how they align, underneath its construct. And this is one item under one construct. Here, we can start to say, okay, let's look at this here. Let's read into those numbers. What do they mean? This is, again, this is a hypothetical example, but this is what we give to companies, and we give them either in a PDF version or electronically or through an app that we have. So we'll show you where you stand, your own score, against the Brandr Index. So that's the red and the black one. And we put it on a scale there so we can see it. And then we show you a country, and again, it can be your industry, it can be telecom, or it can be fast-moving consumer goods, or it can be whatever we have data on, what is relevant to our clients. So, but in this case, it's country. And then we also pull up 5% of the lowest scores, 5% of the highest scores also. Because what does it mean to score 52? We don't really know until we have something to benchmark it against. So 52 is simply a low number. If you score only half, you're not doing good. That's a little bit obvious. But what does it mean to score 78 or 73 or 69? We don't really know until we can compare to our competitors. And we always have to benchmark against the best, because that's good business practice. Do it well enough the way those who are best in the world, they do it. But we also need to be looking at how the scores are distributed, how many are in the blue zone, how many are agreeing, how many are disagreeing, or how many are neutral. So not to keep this any longer, this is my last slide actually. So I want to leave you with, I'm gonna let this slide live while I say the closing words. So a brand, a huge concept, hard to measure, hard to understand, and hard to sometimes justify. How do I know how much money I should spend on my brand versus a campaign, back to school campaign, Easter campaign, summer campaign? How do I know how much money I should spend on just a brand? And how can I justify return on investment on a brand, building image that I will only be able to utilize in a year or 2 or 3? I won't sell anything tomorrow. That's not going to happen. It's not going to change my bottom line tomorrow. Maybe not even until next year. So that's a debate that all of us have. So we have to believe in the philosophy of branding, if you will. We have to believe that this angle of social science, which branding is, makes money for us. We have to believe it. I can show you the empirics, and I can just show you with the numbers. It's not about believing. It's about just reading the numbers. But still, it's hard because branding is so it's such a fuzzy thing. For us to really properly understand what we should do, we need to measure and we need to benchmark. So when we start to spend that money on our brand, we need to understand in exactly where we stand and where we are going what are our KPIs, and how does this tie nicely within other KPIs when we're running our business. And we also need to understand, okay, here, this is a market research, but it still has a space in the company's boardroom, because the board should be looking at those indices also. So, if you have questions, you can write it to us, or you can put them, in the chat, or send us an email, or talk to us on LinkedIn, or call us on the phone if you want to know more. But that's my piece on the Brandr Index. Thank you for your attention.